you'll see that there's a lot of explaining going on the other side with in the newspaper. Nicola Willis has said, oh, look, there's nothing to see here. She said a strange thing. She said, look, equal pay is here to stay. Now, equal pay is not pay equity. Equal pay is the fact that if two people, one is a man and one is a woman, are doing exactly the same job, they should be paid the same. That's been in place since 1972, and of course it's going nowhere, but it seems like Nicola Willis is stuck in 1972, because what pay equity is the idea that if there are two similar jobs that have similar qualifications, similar kind of hours, similar stresses, similar risks, that they should also be paid the same, where one industry might be dominated by men and one industry might be dominated by women. Now, it's a pretty tough job to go through and look at that. But we know by looking across multiple industries that women-dominated industries are paid, on average and in general, lower than men. So it's a really important task to go through that process and say, okay, let's take social workers. Let's look at what qualifications they need. Let's look at the hours that they work. Let's look at the stress that it puts on them and their family. Let's look at the risky situations they find themselves in. And let's try and look across other industries for comparators. That's the pay equity process as it was. Now, there's a number of changes that the government's put in that make that process pretty much impossible. The first thing they've done is put up the threshold for what it means to be woman-dominated from 60% to 70% and more. Has to be dominated for 10 years. So first thing they do is put it up. So for example, probation officers, 68% women, no longer a woman-dominated industry under the law. That's the first thing that they've done. The next thing they've done is they've said, oh, well, in terms of comparisons, we want comparisons to be with the same employer. Now, that makes no sense. That makes it nearly impossible to bring a pay equity claim because it's not about being in the same employer. And if you can't do same employer, they say, or a similar employer. Now, the fact, taking social workers again, now, it's just not going, you can't look at oranga tamariki or, any other particular employer and say, okay, let's look at similar jobs within that employer because they're all social workers and it's going to be all those women that dominate it. So you need to look outside of the industry to comparator industries. Now, that's now not going to work. So you can't look across and say, okay, what do youth aid workers or youth police officers do in this space? How does that look? Is their job similar? Because they're paid a chunk more. So that's what the government's doing. But the key takeaway is this, that this is a genuine step backwards for women in work. And this government is pretending, and the Minister for Women, I find her attitude to be incomprehensible. She's had the temerity to suggest that this is in some way good for women, that this is a better process. It's palpably not. They should just be upfront and say, look, we don't like the system. These pay rises that the Labour government was going through and progressively giving women in different industries, we don't want to do that. We want to spend the money elsewhere. And this is what you get when you get a government that basically is giving tax cuts to some people, particularly to landlords and tobacco companies, is tightening the screws on the budget and is essentially running out of cash. So they've had to say, well, pay equity, not for us. We're going backwards to 1972. Sure, if you're in the same job and you're doing the same role, you get equal pay. But in terms of fairness across industries for women, parity with men doing similar, comparable roles, not for the National Party. So just remember that. That's why we're opposing this so fiercely. Anyway, I better go. I've got work to do.